Hi, and welcome to this native instrument battery tutorial. Battery is a great drum machine sampler, and it is really ideal for situations in which you need a really comprehensive drum kit, and also where you want to create your own sounds and be very original when it comes to drum tracks creation. So battery is very simple. Everything happens in one single page. First, let's learn how to load a preset kit. So here I can choose the kit option, and I'm going to see all the kits that I have available on this computer. And so to preload a kit, you can just choose the kit, tap on it, and now all the different cells here are filled with presets sounds. To preview a cell, you simply tap on it, or you use your keyboard to hear each cell individually. Each cell is assigned to a specific key and MIDI note. And so that's the best way to just start getting familiar with the potential and the sound palette that battery can offer. So here I really recommend spending a little bit of time and just go through different kits and different sounds just to understand the potential. It is really comprehensive and really fun to use. Now if I want to start my own kit, I'm gonna go up here, and under File I'm gonna select New Kit. This allows me to start from scratch where all the different cells are empty. Right, so if I tap on a cell, there's nothing. So how do I fill in a cell? Again, very simple. I can switch the view here on the side to samples. This shows me all the samples that are available at the moment in my library. As you can see, there are really many. Of course, we can load any wave files, so we can create our own samples or import them from other libraries. If you are looking for a specific type of percussive sound, you can just filter all your samples by selecting, for example, drums, and then selecting kick. Now I'm looking here to all the different kicks that are available in my library. In order to load a specific sample into a cell, I simply tap on the sample and automatically it will be loaded into that cell. If I want to preview automatically the sample that I'm clicking on it, I need to make sure that down here I have the speaker icon selected. That allows me to automatically preview it. If I have this button on, automatically the sample that I select will be sent to the cell. So in this case, I'm just going to have this as a preview, and when I find a kick that I like, I can just drag it to the cell. I can also use the search field here to look for specific type of sound. So now I have two different type of kicks on these two cells. Now of course I could go on a different cells and maybe look for a snare. And now again I can just use my keyboard Of course, I can layer them by pressing them at the same time. So as you can see, it's very easy to start creating your own kit. Now this is a good time to save the kit. So I'm gonna go again up here. I'm gonna select File, and I'm gonna select Save Kit as. And I can just give it a name. And now I can keep working and improving the kit. Now down here, I have different tabs that I can use to control different parameters of my kit. On the main tab, I can control different parameters of the cell that I have selected. So in this case, for this cell, I can control and change the volume envelope, the decay, the hold. I can change the envelope of the pitch. I can change the velocity, and if the velocity is going to affect the pitch. And how the velocity is going to affect the volume, which in general, in most cases, you want to have it to the maximum. Even though if you want to recreate faithfully traditional drum machine, you might want to have this actually to 0. So velocity just has no impact on the actual volume of each sample. You can choose also what's the engine to play back that waveform. Usually you want sampler, but you have different options. If you use a vintage playback engine, you can actually recreate the sonic feature of very famous sampler, like the MP60, for example. So that's kind of like an extra color that you can give it. You can also have a filter, a compressor, and apply delay and reverb through those two sands. Those two sands again are individual controls for each different cell. So as you can see, it's very powerful. Just from this main view, I can control the sound pretty accurately. Here I can also choose the start and end of my sample. So I can do some very quick editing if I need to. And I can load a different sample right from here. I can retune it, I can reverse it. I can choose the key range of that sample. So if I wanted to cover not only my C2, but go also lower than C2, I can do that. See, now it's triggered by also different cells. In general, usually you want it, have it on the same key, right? But you have the option to do that. You can invert the phase, you can pan it, and this is the overall level of that cell. So right from the main panel, you can do a lot to alter your sample. Now let's take a look at the second tab, the effects. Again, these effects are applied to each cell individually. So if I look at this snare here, I can apply some saturation. And I have different types of saturation. And I can also change the warmth, a high pass filter, and the overall output. I can apply a lo-fi, like a bit crusher. I can apply a filter and EQ, a compressor, and a transient master, which allows me to make the sound punchier by enhancing the transient point of my sample. All these effects can be tweaked by choosing either a factory preset and then saving the preset, so that's very useful in case you want to apply the same effect to different cells. In the modulation area, I can apply 2 LFOs and 1 envelope to up to 8 different parameters. And the way it works is that I can assign the source of the modulation and the receiving end of the modulation. So for example, I could have velocity, pitch bend, aftertouch, key position, a MIDI control change, or some sort of random parameters controller, plus the LFO and my envelope modulator to control pretty much any parameter that I have available, including my effects. So for example, I could have the saturation being controlled by velocity. And this is the amount of the modulation applied. So I have very little saturation at low velocity, but the saturation increases when I reach higher velocities. So it's very, very comprehensive and very easy to use. Now, these are very short sounds, so I'm not going to use an LFO to control a parameter. But for example, on a cymbal, let's say I want to load a cymbal here. I could have an LFO, for example, controlling the tune. Right? And so this is my frequency, speed of the LFO, and it's going to control my tune, meaning the pitch of the cymbal. So as you can see, it's really, really powerful. Or I could have my envelope controlling the pitch. Right? Because my envelope here does exactly this. With the release, it's gonna go down in pitch. So very, very cool, very powerful, and very simple to use. I can access 4 more modulator matrices here by selecting 5 through 8. In the Setup tab, I can control parameters like the MIDI input velocity, which means I can control the curvature of my velocity. I can control the channels on which each cell is receiving from, if it's tracking the key, the location on the keyboard, and if the note is latched. I can assign each cell to a different voice group. This is useful, for example, for hi-hats, where you want to have the open hi-hat and the closed hi-hat on the same group, which means if the hi-hat is open, when I play a closed hi-hat, it's going to stop. It's going to choke the sample of the open hi-hat. You can assign a number of voices for each group, which is useful again for the situation that I was just describing. And then you can select how the cell is activated. Usually you want the note on as the event that triggers the note, but you could also trigger it with a note off. And then the conditions when that cell is triggered. Again, in general, in most cases, you want to have it always triggered. You can also select some articulations. can add some presets here. Which is useful to create some certain effects automatically, like a flam or a drag. And I can change the speed and the dynamics. So very cool. And of course I can turn off those modules by just tapping there. I can have a MIDI echo if I want. And I can humanize it automatically, which means automatically I can change the tuning or the actual sound. You have to be careful because, you know, I would use it very sporadically and depending on which type of parts you're doing. But if you were trying to recreate an acoustic kit, can be kind of useful just to avoid the more drum machine-like effect. In the editor is where I work specifically on each cell at the sample level. Again, I can change here to the end and start of the sample. Here I can, of course, reverse the sample. And I can change the velocities at which that sample is triggered. So if I want this sample triggered only by velocity up to 64, I can do that. When I hit velocities higher than 64, I'm not hearing anything because there's no other samples loaded. So each cell can have actually more than one sample. So if I go here and I choose a different snare, I can load this snare right in here. And now, if they both receive on the same velocities, I basically layer the two together. But I can assign different velocity ranges to each sample so that I can trigger each sample depending on the velocity that I'm sending. So again, it's great because if I want to easily layer two sounds, this is really useful. I can tune each sample. Those are called zones, right? Because they're assigned to the same cell, but each one is a different zone. And each zone has a different volume, pan, tuning. Root key, which determines where the original sample is going to be placed in relationship to the keyboard. And of course the lower level and high level for my velocity of each zone. So again, really comprehensive and very easy to use if I want to layer some samples. So if I want to layer 3 samples, here we go. And finally, I can go to the master options. Here I have my 2 OGs return channels, the reverb and the delay. Remember, I can select how much I send of each cell to these 2 right from the main tab here. And so I can change how those 2 effects work right from here. I can assign each cell to a different bus if I want. I have 4 buses. And I have control over the entire patch, the entire kit, in terms of EQ, compressor, transient master, saturation, and limiter. So those effects are applied to the entire kit. Again, if I made any changes, remember to save your kit so you can keep working. A very important thing to remember is that I can assign each different cell to a separate output. This is going to be very useful when you start mixing your kit. If you look down here, when I created this instance of battery, I selected multi-output 16 stereo output. I always recommend doing that right from the beginning. This means that Logic allows me to add extra aux tracks that receives from the separate output of battery. So if I want to have separate outputs for my kicks and my snares, I'm gonna simply click here the plus button that added 1 or 2 more aux tracks. And here in battery, I can simply right click on a cell and select the output. And the output can be assigned to the master, one of the 4 buses, or a direct output. So if I want my kicks to be output from 1 and 2, I'm going to select master. But if I want my snares to be output to 3 and 4, again, I'm going to just choose 3 and 4. So when I play a kick, it's going to come out from my master fader. And when I play a snare, it's going to come out from the auxiliary channel. And I would name this snare, so I remember what that is. Maybe this could be my cymbals, which means I need to assign this to my output 5 and 6. And now it's coming out from the cymbals. So as you can see, it's really simple to use, but it's very powerful. It's powerful for layering sounds, and it's powerful to create really interesting sounds right from the built-in effects and all the different parameters and modulation that I can choose here. So I hope you enjoyed this quick tutorial, and I'm really looking forward to hear some great original drum parts.